What if the story of our beginnings isn't what we've been told? Imagine for a moment that the world itself is not a gift, but a cage, its beauty, a clever disguise, its boundaries invisible but absolute. The ancient Gnostics whispered of this secret, a truth so unsettling it was branded heresy, that the God who shaped the heavens and the earth was not a loving father, but the architect of a prison. In the beginning, Genesis tells us, God created the heavens and the earth, light and darkness, land and sea, beasts and birds, each summoned into being with a word. But beneath this familiar tale, the Gnostics saw a different narrative unfolding. They saw not a world blossoming with freedom, but a structure meticulously designed for containment. Every river, every mountain, every star in the sky, each a brick in the cosmic wall, separating humanity from its true origin. Eden, the so-called paradise, stands at the heart of this mystery. Most of us picture it as a garden of endless delight, a place where Adam and Eve walked in innocence and joy. But look closer, Eden is a walled garden, its boundaries strictly enforced. In the center, two trees grow, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. One offers immortality, the other forbidden wisdom. Both are guarded, both are off limits. Even in paradise there are rules. Even in paradise there is something you cannot touch. Why would a loving creator place temptation at the heart of innocence, only to punish those who reach for it? The Gnostics saw a trap, not a test. They called the God of Genesis the demiurge, a craftsman, yes, but a jealous and flawed one. The demiurge is obsessed with order, with obedience, with keeping the souls of humanity ignorant of their true divine origins. The garden is not a playground, it is a holding cell. The tree of knowledge is not a danger to humanity, but to the Warden himself. When the serpent slithers into the story, everything changes. Traditional readings cast the serpent as the villain, the tempter who leads humanity astray. But the Gnostics saw something different, a liberator, a messenger from realms beyond the prison walls. The serpent's whisper is not a lie, but an invitation. You will not surely die. Your eyes will be opened, and you will be like gods, knowing good and evil. In this moment, the serpent becomes the first revolutionary, the spark that threatens to ignite the prison's dry tinder. Adam and Eve eat the fruit. Their eyes are opened. They see for the first time the bars of their cage. And what is the response of the Warden? Not mercy, not guidance, but swift and severe punishment. They are cast out not into freedom, but into a harsher confinement, a world of toil and pain. The gates of Eden are slammed shut, guarded by flaming swords. The message is clear. Knowledge is forbidden, awakening is treason. But the Gnostic story doesn't end here. It asks us to look deeper, to question the very nature of the world we inhabit. Why is suffering woven into the fabric of existence? Why does the pursuit of knowledge so often lead to exile and punishment? The Gnostics believed that the demiurge designed the world to keep us distracted, divided, and docile. Every pleasure is fleeting, every joy tinged with sorrow. We chase after meaning, but find only echoes. The prison is not just physical, but psychological, a labyrinth of illusions and half-truths. Yet, even in this darkness, there are cracks. The act of eating the fruit is not a fall, but a jailbreak. Adam and Eve become the first in a long line of rebels, seekers who refuse to accept the Warden's version of reality. The Gnostic texts are filled with stories of such figures, heroes and heretics, who risk everything to pierce the veil, to remember the divine spark buried within. The world outside Eden is harsh, but it is also real. The pain of exile becomes the price of awakening. The Gnostics taught that the soul's true home is not in the garden or the world, but in the infinite realms beyond the demiurge's reach. Every act of questioning, every moment of doubt is a step toward freedom. The prison walls may be high, but they are not unbreakable. As we trace the lines of this ancient story, we begin to see our own reflections. How often do we accept the boundaries set for us, mistaking them for the limits of possibility? How often do we silence the voice that urges us to seek, to question, to dream? The Gnostic vision is both unsettling and empowering. It tells us that the world is not as it seems, that the greatest heresy is to accept the prison as all there is. And so the stage is set. The prison has been built, the warden stands watchful, and the first prisoners have tasted forbidden knowledge. But the story is far from over. With every act of rebellion, every search for hidden truth, the walls begin to tremble. The serpent's whisper echoes still, inviting us to look beyond the garden, to seek the keys that might one day set us free. As we move deeper into this journey, the question lingers. If the world is a prison, what lies beyond its walls? And who or what will dare to challenge the warden's rule? If Eden was humanity's first cell, then the centuries that followed were a relentless tightening of the warden's grip. The world outside the garden, far from being a place of wild freedom, quickly became a realm of rules-laws etched in stone, rituals of blood and fire, and a constant drumbeat of obedience. The Gnostics saw in this unfolding drama not the loving guidance of a wise parent, but the calculated discipline of a jailer determined to keep his inmates docile and divided. From the moment Adam and Eve stepped into exile, the story of the Bible is marked by boundaries. There are forbidden lands, forbidden foods, forbidden acts. There are chosen people and outcasts, clean and unclean, sacred and profane. The world is divided and subdivided, every line a reminder. You are being watched, measured, judged. The Gnostic mind recoils at this vision. Why would a true God, infinite and loving, delight in such endless division? Why would the path to the divine be paved with so many prohibitions? Consider the story of the Tower of Babel. Humanity, united by a single language and a single vision, dares to build a tower to the heavens. It is an act of audacity, yes, but also of longing, a desire to reach beyond the limits imposed by the world. The response is swift and severe. The warden descends, confounds their speech, scatters them across the earth. Unity is shattered, confusion reigns. The Gnostic sees the hand of the demiurge here, terrified that his prisoners might glimpse the world beyond the walls, desperate to keep them isolated and ignorant. Then come the laws, hundreds of them, delivered to Moses atop a mountain wreathed in fire and smoke. Thou shalt not becomes the refrain of a people. Every aspect of life is regulated. What to eat, how to dress, when to work, how to worship. Sacrifice becomes the price of admission, blood spilled to appease a God whose appetite for obedience seems endless. The Gnostics read these passages with a shiver. They saw in the sacrifices not a path to holiness, but a ritual of control. The warden demands tribute, and the people comply, hoping for mercy, fearing punishment. Even the holiest places are marked by exclusion. The tabernacle, and later the temple, are built as concentric circles of access. Only the high priest, on a single day each year, may enter the Holy of Holies, the supposed dwelling place of God. The rest are kept at a distance, their yearning for the divine channeled into prescribed rituals and distant prayers. The message is unmistakable. The presence of God is not a birthright, but a privilege granted to a select few, and only under the strictest conditions. But the Gnostic tradition whispers of another truth. Hidden beneath the surface of these stories are moments of rebellion, flashes of insight that threaten the warden's order. Think of Job, who dares to question the justice of his suffering, refusing to accept easy answers. Think of the prophets who rail against empty rituals and demand justice and mercy instead. These voices are sparks in the darkness, reminders that the prison is not impregnable, that the rules are not the final word. And then there are the archons, the cosmic enforcers of the demiurge's will. The Gnostics described them as shadowy beings, each assigned to a sphere of existence, each working tirelessly to keep souls trapped in ignorance. Every law, every sacrifice, every division serves their purpose. The archons are not just mythic figures, they are the embodiment of every force that seeks to limit, to divide, to control. They are the wardens within the warden, the jailers of the mind and spirit. Yet even as the rules multiply and the walls grow higher, cracks begin to appear. The longing for freedom cannot be extinguished. The desire for knowledge, for unity, for direct communion with the divine persists. The Gnostics saw in these yearnings the first stirrings of awakening, the soul remembering its true home, straining against the chains of law and sacrifice. The world, then, is not just a prison, but a battleground. Every law is a test, every sacrifice a challenge. Will you accept the Warden's rules, or will you seek the hidden path? Will you be content with ritual, or will you hunger for revelation? The Gnostic answer is clear. The rules are not the end, but the beginning. They are the bars against which the soul must press, the obstacles that reveal the depth of our longing for freedom. As the story unfolds, the tension mounts. The warden's grip tightens, but the prisoners grow restless. The archons watch, but the sparks of rebellion flicker in the darkness. The next chapter draws us deeper into this conflict, as hidden rebels and forbidden wisdom begin to challenge the order of the prison. The question is no longer whether the rules can be broken, but who will dare to break them and what price they will pay for their defiance. Every prison, no matter how secure, eventually shows its cracks. In the grand narrative of the Bible, beneath the surface of obedience and ritual, there are moments when the human spirit strains against its bonds. The Gnostics were experts at spotting these fissures, those subtle, almost invisible rebellions that hint at a deeper longing for truth. They saw in the ancient stories not just tales of faith, but coded messages from those who had glimpsed the world beyond the warden's reach. Consider the story of Job. Here is a man who follows every rule, who sacrifices and prays, who lives in the shadow of the warden's laws. Yet when calamity strikes, Job does the unthinkable. He questions. He refuses to accept suffering as just punishment, refuses to mouth empty pieties. Why? He demands, his voice echoing through the ages. Why must the innocent suffer? The answers he receives are cryptic, evasive. The warden, it seems, cannot tolerate questions-only submission, but Job's defiance is a crack in the facade, a reminder that even the most faithful can rebel. The wisdom literature of the Bible is another seam in the prison wall. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon, they shimmer with a different light, one that is less about rules and more about searching. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity, declares the teacher in Ecclesiastes, his words heavy with disillusionment. He has tasted all that the world offers, wisdom, pleasure, toil, and found it empty. The Gnostics heard in this a secret code. The material world, no matter how alluring, is ultimately unsatisfying. True meaning lies elsewhere, in the hidden realms of spirit. But perhaps the most daring rebels are those who appear only in whispers, in the apocryphal and Gnostic texts that the Warden's scribes tried to erase. The Gospel of Thomas, unearthed after centuries in the desert sands, offers a Jesus who speaks not of sin and sacrifice, but of awakening. The kingdom is inside you, and it is outside you, he says. When you come to know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will realize that you are the children of the living Father. This is not the voice of a jailer, but of a liberator one who urges his followers to seek the light within, to break free from the illusions of the world. The Gospel of Philip goes further, hinting at secret rituals and hidden knowledge. Salvation, it suggests, is not a matter of faith alone, but of gnosis, direct, experiential knowledge of the divine. The Warden's rules are powerless against those who awaken to their true nature. The Apocryphon of John paints the demiurge as a blind god, ignorant of the higher realms, desperate to keep his creation in the dark. But even here, there are rebel Sophia, the embodiment of wisdom, who sows the seeds of awakening in the hearts of humanity. Throughout the biblical narrative, there are other figures who slip through the cracks. Solomon, famed for his wisdom, is said in later traditions to possess secret knowledge keys to the mysteries of heaven and earth. Enoch, who walked with God and was no more, is rumored in apocryphal lore to have ascended beyond the prison, returning with visions of cosmic architecture and angelic hierarchies. These stories, half hidden and often suppressed, are the blueprints for escape. The Gnostics believed that these rebels were not isolated anomalies, but part of a hidden tradition, a lineage of seekers who refused to accept the Warden's reality as the only reality. Their stories are encoded in scripture, waiting to be discovered by those with eyes to see and ears to hear. Every question asked, every rule broken, every secret sought is an act of resistance against the demiurge's dominion. But rebellion comes at a cost. The Warden does not tolerate dissent lightly. Prophets are exiled, visionaries are silenced, texts are burned. The archons, those cosmic enforcers, sow confusion and fear, turning would-be liberators into heretics and madmen. Yet the longing for freedom persists, passed down like a smuggled note from cell to cell, generation to generation. In the Gnostic imagination, the world is alive with hidden messages, a dream, a sudden intuition, a line of scripture that glows with new meaning. These are the signs that the prison is not as airtight as it seems. The soul, though battered and bewildered, remembers its origin. It senses the presence of other rebels, other seekers, and the promise of a world beyond the Warden's reach. As the cracks widen, the story quickens. The hidden wisdom begins to spread, whispered from teacher to disciple, encoded in parables and symbols. The Warden's grip tightens, but the light of Gnosis flickers in the darkness, impossible to extinguish. The next chapter will bring us to the brink, to the moment when the longing for liberation erupts into open revolt, and the possibility of escape becomes more than a distant dream. The question now is not just who will rebel, but how far they will go, and what they will risk to shatter the illusion and taste the freedom that lies beyond the prison walls. There comes a moment in every prison story when the longing for freedom becomes too fierce to ignore. The walls that once felt impenetrable start to tremble, and the whispers of rebellion swell into a chorus. For the Gnostics, this moment is not just a historical event, but a cosmic turning point, a spiritual jailbreak echoing through the ages. The Warden's rules, the Archon's vigilance, the endless rituals of sacrifice and obedience, all are powerless in the face of an awakened soul. The seeds of revolt are sown quietly at first. A question asked in the dark, a forbidden text passed from hand to trembling hand, a dream that refuses to fade with the dawn. In the dusty corners of synagogues and the candlelit gatherings of early Christians, rumors begin to circulate. There is more to the story, they say. There is a knowledge, a gnosis, that can set you free. The Gnostic Christ emerges as the great liberator, not the sacrificial lamb of mainstream doctrine, but a revealer of secrets, a breaker of chains. He speaks in riddles and parables, urging his followers to look within, to seek the divine spark buried beneath layers of fear and forgetfulness. If those who lead you say to you, "See, the kingdom is in the sky," then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, "It is in the sea," then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. These words, preserved in the Gospel of Thomas, are dynamite in the hands of the oppressed. The revolt is not a clash of swords, but a revolution of perception. The awakened soul begins to see the prison for what it is, a construct, a system designed to keep it small and afraid. The archons, once terrifying, now appear as petty bureaucrats, enforcing rules that lose their power the moment they are questioned. The rituals of sacrifice and purity, once sacred, now seem hollow, mere distractions from the truth that waits within. As the movement grows, the Warden's response is swift and brutal. Heretics are hunted, their writings destroyed, their names smeared with accusations of madness and blasphemy. But the Gnostic fire is not so easily extinguished. Every act of suppression only fans the flames. The more the Warden tightens his grip, the more souls slip through his fingers, awakened by dreams, visions, and the secret teachings that refuse to die. The Gnostic texts describe this awakening as a remembrance, a sudden shattering realization that the soul is not of this world, but a visitor, a spark of the divine trapped in flesh and bone. The world, once so solid and real, begins to dissolve. The prison walls are revealed as illusions, maintained by fear and ignorance. The soul remembers its origin, its true home in the realms of light, and the longing for return becomes unbearable. This is the climax of the Gnostic journey, the moment of revolt, the great escape. It is not without peril. The archons do not surrender easily. They attack with doubt, despair, and the seductive comforts of the material world. They whisper that the prison is all there is, that freedom is a fantasy. But the awakened soul is not so easily deceived. It has tasted the forbidden fruit, glimpsed the world beyond the veil, and nothing will ever be the same. The Gnostic community becomes a fellowship of fugitives, each carrying a piece of the secret, each risking everything for the promise of liberation. Their gatherings are marked by joy and danger, by the thrill of discovery and the constant threat of betrayal. They know the cost of awakening, but they also know that the only true prison is ignorance. As the revolt spreads, the boundaries between prisoner and warden begin to blur. Some archons, it is whispered, are themselves fallen sparks, longing for redemption. Some laws, once seen as chains, become stepping stones, tools for awakening, rather than instruments of control. The prison, it turns out, was never as solid as it seemed. Its power lies in the belief of its inmates, and that belief is crumbling. The Great Escape is not a single event, but a process, a journey from darkness to light, from ignorance to knowledge, from slavery to freedom. It is a path walked by prophets and poets, by heretics and visionaries, by anyone who dares to question the Warden's authority and seek the truth for themselves. As this chapter draws to a close, the air is electric with possibility. The prison walls are shaking, the archons are in disarray, and the Warden's voice grows desperate and shrill. The soul stands at the threshold, trembling with anticipation. The next step is the most dangerous and the most exhilarating. What lies beyond the walls? What becomes of the soul that dares to escape? The final chapter awaits, shimmering on the horizon. A promise and a challenge, a revelation and a mystery. The journey is far from over, and the greatest secrets are yet to be revealed. The moment of escape is not the end of the story, but its true beginning. For the Gnostics, the journey beyond the prison walls is not a flight into oblivion, but a return, a homecoming, to a reality more profound and radiant than anything the Warden could ever imagine. The soul, battered but unbroken, stands blinking in the light of a world it once knew but had long forgotten. What is this world beyond the walls? The Gnostic texts speak in riddles and images, for language itself falters at the threshold of the ineffable. It is a place of fullness, pleroma, where every spark of consciousness is united in a vast sea of living light. Here, the soul is no longer a prisoner, no longer divided by fear, shame, or ignorance. The longing that haunted every night in the cell is finally answered, not by more rules or rituals, but by direct, ecstatic communion with the divine. But the journey leaves its mark. The soul carries with it the memory of exile, the scars of struggle, the wisdom born of suffering. The world it left behind, the world of laws and sacrifices, of archons and illusions, now appears in a new light. It was never the whole story, never the final word. Even the Warden, the demiurge, is seen with new eyes, not as an eternal enemy, but as a tragic figure, blind to the greater reality, clinging to power out of fear of his own limitations. The Gnostic vision does not demand vengeance or hatred, but understanding. The prison was real, the suffering genuine, but the escape reveals that the walls were always, in some sense, an illusion. The true enemy was never the Warden alone, but the ignorance that made his rule possible. To awaken is to see through the illusion, not just for oneself, but for all who remain behind. And so, the story circles back to its beginning. The soul, now free, becomes a messenger, a bearer of forbidden wisdom. It returns to the world not as a prisoner, but as a liberator, whispering the secret to those still trapped in darkness. You are more than you have been told. The kingdom is within you. The walls are not as real as they seem. This is the final twist, the ultimate revelation. The prison was never absolute. Every act of questioning, every moment of longing, every flash of insight was a crack in the wall, a ray of light pointing the way home. The journey beyond the walls is open to all who dare to seek, to all who refuse to accept the Warden's story as the only story. But the Gnostic path is not for the faint of heart. It demands courage, patience, and a willingness to walk alone. The world will call you mad, a heretic, a dreamer. The archons will whisper that you are lost, that you have strayed too far. Yet the soul that has tasted freedom cannot return to its chains. It moves forward, guided by a light that no prison can extinguish. And so, the narrative ends, not with a final answer, but with an invitation, a challenge that echoes across the centuries. If the world is a prison, what will you do with the key? Will you cling to the safety of the familiar or risk everything for the promise of gnosis? Will you accept the Warden's rules or write your own story? The choice is yours. The journey is yours. The walls may still stand, but the door is open. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of sight, a new world waits, a world where every soul is free, every question is sacred, and every story is unfinished. Perhaps the greatest heresy is not to rebel, but to forget that you were ever meant to be free.